Hello everyone, this is Hillary Adkin, Office of Housing Environmental Clearance Officer. I'm here today with Liz Zepeda, Environmental Specialist in the CPD Office of Environment, and we're here to talk to you about RAD. Wanted to let you know before we get started that you are all on mute, but we're happy to take your questions as the presentation goes on. So if you have one, please raise your hand via the webinar. You can also type in questions, but we encourage you to raise your hand and just go ahead and ask us live. And with that, I will turn it over to Liz.
Thank you. Realizing hopefully this buzzing of this projector right next to me isn't a problem, but I guess raise your hand if it is, if you have trouble hearing me. So I'll go over to the agenda, which is on the next slide. So first I'm going to do just an overview of what HEROS is, which a lot of you should know already from other trainings we've had. And then some tools and resources that will be helpful for HEROS. We'll do kind of an overview tour of how HEROS works, finally ending with a live demonstration of going through the system, kind of depending on how much time we have when we finish with everything else and any questions you have. So again, doing a little bit of review on what HEROS is. The short answer is HEROS is the new 4128. Right now, they kind of coexist and they're both usable, but in the coming months, years, the timeline is a little unclear. The 4128 that you know, the paper version, will stop being an option, and HEROS will replace it as our environmental review process. The idea of HEROS, kind of big picture, is to create one environmental review process and format that's consistent as much as we can possibly make it to all HUD reviews and all HUD programs. So it's used throughout HUD. And you'll use HEROS to create your environmental reviews and then submit that environmental review to your supervisor, to your approving official, and if it's over 200 units, your field environmental officer or regional environmental officer, all within the system to sign off. So at this time, only HUD staff can access Part 50 environmental reviews in HEROS. But long-term, it is going to be accessible to the full range of everyone who's involved in the environmental review process. So it will include consultants, contractors, public housing authority staff, and you'll be able to kind of share that environmental review process all within the system, within HEROS. So the idea of HEROS is we take the user through the environmental review process from beginning to end. We kind of tend to call it a TurboTax-like system. We want to be able to lead a new user, someone who is not familiar with environmental reviews at all, to understand how that process works. We can't make it completely foolproof because environmental reviews are pretty complicated, but we'll take you through the steps, let you know where to get more information, where to get and when to get help, and just take you through that full process from beginning to end. It does not include program-specific requirements right now. You'll see that with site contamination, especially for RAD, because RAD does have unique contamination analysis. HEROS won't walk you through that. But there is a screen to enter program-specific content for housing. It's just a little generic, and that is something that we're working on a long-term plan to tailor more to housing programs. So we had 4 kind of goals of HEROS. We know that people within HUD and our clients at HUD have some systems fatigue. I know every time I hear we're getting a new system, I get a little nervous. But we really have gotten some very positive feedback about HEROS, and we, I think, have very good goals. We really want to be a system that helps people and that people find better than what they were doing before. People do tend to tell us that it's user-friendly and more intuitive than a lot of our systems. So want to tell you, don't be scared. We think it's a positive development, especially over the 4128, which is not the best form in existence right now. So we want to streamline the environmental review process, make it not a clunky series of paper forms, which isn't necessarily a problem for those of you using the 4128, since 2 pages isn't very clunky. It's just not quite enough room. We're also providing a lot more guidance and instructions, especially as compared to a 2-page form, which is not super clear. Our third goal is to increase transparency, which is a requirement of the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, which is the framework of the environmental review process. Environmental reviews are supposed to be public documents that the public can review, and that's something that's really important to us in developing HEROS, and we do make our environmental reviews pretty transparent. Those are developed through HEROS. So actually, if you click on that link, you'll go to the HUD Exchange, where you can see environmental reviews that have been created in HEROS now. So people are using HEROS, and those are being posted on our website, where the public can see what's going on in their communities, hopefully. Thinking about it. Ooh, this looks interesting. Let's go down on this page. Still working on it. Okay. Oh, that didn't go quite the right place. Let's see. Can I take over the mouse? Sorry about that. Forgot that I would want to do fancy things in the middle of this. Sorry, my link didn't work, but if you go here to our environmental review records in the Exchange, you'll see reviews that are posted now. There's a lot of them. And I just wanted to pull one up so you can see what those look like. So I'm going to take us to a Part 50 review that was completed. I know that we have some in Boston. So when you finish your reviews, they will go here, and we'll see how long that takes to load. But I can show you what a completed environmental review in HEROS looks like, maybe, and it looks like this, which you'll get kind of a document which will go through project description. This one's a little short, but they'll have attachments, and it just kind of goes through the full environmental review process so that people can see what that looks like when it's all put together.
So this spits out what otherwise would have been a Form 4128. This is HEROS' version of regurgitating everything you put in.
Right. Yeah. So we take something very complicated and that was previously condensed into one very, very small form and give it a little room to breathe and to spell things out into this longer document. So you can peruse those at your leisure if you'd like to. I'll go back to the PowerPoint. Hopefully that all worked. And then finally, our last goal is to improve our knowledge of environmental conditions and what's going on in the world of HUD's environmental reviews. Right now, the way HUD is structured and the way our environmental reviews are done, we don't really know what goes on in environmental reviews. We don't know how many are done every year. We certainly don't know how many are in a wetland or a brownfield or affecting a historic property. And I think we hope that it'll be really helpful to us to tailor our guidance and our policies to where we need to be when we know what's out there. I have not been looking. Are there questions coming in? Okay. Thanks. All right. So who can use HEROS now? Kind of in a beta mode right now where we're rolling HEROS out on a program-by-program basis. It's kind of a long-term pilot while we're getting certain groups in there to give us their feedback. Certain other groups are just piloting right now, and we're working on keeping moving and improving and making a system that really works. So you're one of our pilot groups, our first group in housing to really roll out. And we think it's a really good fit because RAD staff a lot of you are new to environmental reviews, and HEROS was built for people who are new to the environmental review process. So we think it kind of benefits everyone to have you starting out using HEROS that will help you create your environmental reviews, and then you can give us feedback so that we can make a system that works better for you. Long term, we do want to get some improvements that will allow us to involve consultants, contractors, public housing authorities in that process, so you're not having to do the entire thing by yourselves and you're not having to press every button, upload every document on your own. You can have their assistance in that process. That's our top priority right now is on the HEROS team. The second we get the money, that's what we're doing. Here, we can get a Kickstarter going or something. That's our top priority, to get everybody in there. So accessing HEROS, we want to get you all access, and right now most of you do. If you have HEROS access, you will have received an email from me this morning telling you to log in and make sure that you can log in. If you didn't get an email from me this morning, that means you don't have HEROS access. Some of you did just request it last week, in which case you don't have it yet, but it will be coming soon. But if you don't have access, you should have gotten an email from either me or Hillary last week with instructions on requesting access. So please respond to that so that we can get you in the system. If you have any access problems, email me. And then we have two environments. The first one is this one at the top of the page. That's how to log into real HEROS and make a real review. And then we also have a training environment, that's cpd1.hud.gov/HEROS. If you want to just practice using HEROS without making a real review, that's where you can go to play around with the system. So I'm going to go into tools and resources. If you don't remember any other part of this presentation, you should be able to find your way with these next few slides. So first we have our user guide, which unfortunately for you all is a Part 58 user guide right now. We are working on a Part 51 that's tailored specifically for housing and RAD, so that should be coming as soon as Hillary and I find a few minutes.
Liz, you said we only have now Part 50. Do you mean we only have a Part 58?
Yes, we only have a Part 58.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's on our website, and you should be able to get definitely the gist of it, but there are going to be things that aren't quite right because there are differences between Part 50 and Part 58.
Yeah, and like the program-specific stuff that we keep alluding to that's not in the system, we would explain that in the user guide. So that would be something else that would be a little different from this Part 58 document.
So that will be coming soon. Next, we have our e-tutorials. These are 20, like approximately 5-minute videos that each go through a discrete aspect of how to use HEROS. So you don't have to watch a 2-hour webinar. You can just kind of go straight to the video on whatever you're having trouble with. I also, about an hour ago, emailed you a document that kind of fills in some details and clarifies some points specifically for you all, since most of those are, again, targeted to a Part 58 audience. So refer to that. This is our Ask a Question module on the HUD Exchange. You can just email me directly if you have any questions, but we have the HUD Exchange. There's one discrete time when you would need to use the HUD Exchange and not email me. I'll get to that in a second. It's also useful if I'm not available, if I'm on travel or you get a bounce back from me or something. Go to Ask a Question, and your question will be routed to someone else in my office who can help you out. And then finally we have frequently asked questions, which we update fairly often. I have our presidential management fellow going through these today and making sure that everything's updated. So these should be pretty up to date. Next, I'm going to go through kind of an overview of the structure of HEROS and what you'll see when you go through HEROS. I'm not going to hit every step, just going to hit the high points. So first step, before you use HEROS, you'll have to fix your compatibility settings if you're using Internet Explorer. For some reason, HEROS is not compatible with HUD's Internet Explorer settings. Everyone hates this. We have no control over this. Sorry. It's apparently unfixable. So what you have to do is go to Tools and Compatibility View Settings and uncheck all of these boxes. If you don't do that, HEROS won't work, and you'll call me and say that you just keep getting a spinny thinking box instead of any questions, and you can't choose the dates on any of the date boxes, and things don't work. If everything just seems to be shutting down, the odds that your compatibility view settings are wrong is kind of high. So make sure you do that, or you can just use Chrome. That's an alternative too. It works well in Chrome. So again, we have two environments. There's both the training environment and the production environment. If you're creating a real review, please make sure that you do it in the production environment and not the training environment. Yes, somebody affirming that it works well in Chrome. That is true. Just use Chrome. If you can't log into HEROS because you are locked out of your account or something isn't working, call the National Help Desk. If you're trying to log into the training environment and you're locked out of that, you will need to go to the Ask a Question module from a couple of slides back on the HUD Exchange, and somebody there will help you. And again, you should have access, and if you don't, please get in touch with me. So this is the dashboard, and Hillary, feel free to jump in anytime if I'm glossing over anything that would be useful for them. So this is the first thing you'll see when you log into HEROS. This, for you all, will show every Part 50 review in the country right now. We're actually working right now on a fix to HEROS that will tailor that a little bit because you don't really need to see every single Part 50 review in the country. But that's just kind of because of the way the RAD office is structured. So if you want to hone in on your reviews, you can type in your name in the last updated by column or search for the name of your project, so you can tailor it down a little bit. But basically, this is what you'll see. And you'll see these kind of 5 buttons. There's 2 that you can completely ignore. You don't need to ever go to tiered reviews. And you don't need to view the 7015-16, which is a Part 58 issue that will not affect you. But if you want to start a new review, you would press that Start a New Environments Review button. And if you would like to edit a review that you already started, that button is in the bottom left. You might need to scroll down to the bottom of the screen to find it. And if you just wanted to view a review without editing it, that would be that bottom right button. A lot of times I see people who aren't able to edit their reviews, and it's because they selected view instead of edit. Make sure that you press edit. You probably won't ever need that view button. That's only if you're like, I use it when I'm checking in on people's reviews that I'm helping them with. I really don't want to accidentally change something in their review. But you can just generally start or edit. So this next slide will be when you start a new review. This would be the first slide you would see, or the first screen you would see. So here's where you would name your review, put in the funding information, put in the contact information, and just enter a few other pieces that we'll need to figure out where to route your review and what screens you'll have to deal with later on. So I'm going to point out a few areas of confusion on this screen that come up a lot. For the name, it's not crucial. Just put something that you'll remember, that's something that's clear to you, and ideally clear to other people as well. I use the address of the project a lot. But you can put in a lot of characters in there. Next, for the program name, for RAD, RAD did not exist when we designed this screen, so you're not on the list. You'll need to select housing under HUD program and other housing program under program name. If this review is also getting funding from the home program or for CDBG, you can add those in as well. You'll also need to put in the grant number. For that, put in the application's RAD assigned number. Not crucial.
What number would that use?
I got that from Hillary.
Would you use the PIC number there? PIC is where it's leaving from, but it might be a partial conversion. We don't assign chaps a number. Okay. So I think the only thing is the current PIC number. You have to put a number in.
The good news is if it was a partial conversion, we handle that by usually by adding some sort of letter, so that would be very possible. Yeah. Not always, but I think the PIC number is the best thing.
Okay.
We have for that.
And we can kind of follow up and clarify that in the user guide too.
Yeah. We want a number that's useful for you all. So
Great.
whatever be useful to you is what we want. Task. Okay.
Martha, you have a question for us. Martha, you there? Martha? Maybe you need to unmute your phone. Nope. All right.
Do we have other questions?
We have a question here.
Okay. Someone let us know the PIC number is what's being used. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. We will change that to PIC number. Thank you. Another one that people get confused about is the date that your environmental review began. For right now, it's kind of arbitrary. We've just gotten the impression from the White House Council on Environmental Quality that they want us to start reporting how long environmental reviews take, which means that we need to start tracking when they began and when they ended. But nobody has defined for us when an environmental review began yet. So this is kind of a placeholder until we figure out what we actually want you to put there, but basically put the today's date.
We for now put the PHA is supposed to give us an environmental report. Doesn't. So why the date which they give us the environmental report should be the date, which should come in with the finance report.
Yeah.
I treat it like how the program treats, the timelines that we keep track of. So whenever we get like a full application and we start processing, that'd be a good date to put in there.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. So, and then note these little blue information boxes. And I think if you click, we will see what happens when you click on one of those. Yeah, there it is. So there's a little text box you'd get explaining that question. So you'll see those kind of all over the place with a little more information. Oh, that's fine. Time.
Go back, Robert. The question here, does the project anticipate the use of funds or assistance from another federal agency in addition to HUD? So if it's a straight conversion, which is just simply I'm taking my current funding under public housing, I wouldn't check that box. If it's if I'm using capital funds, I wouldn't check that box. If I'm using home funds, I wouldn't check that box. But if I'm getting tax credits for the transaction, is that consider money for federal agency? Because the only other place where a PHA might get something, again, would be tax credits from a federal agency, possibly rural development, but not likely. So it looks like almost you'd never check. You'd almost always check no, unless tax credits are defined here as another federal agency.
No.
No.
I would say no to tax credits.
Okay.
Because their environmental review process is not an issue.
Okay.
So this would be an issue if you were doing a big project and you were getting funding from FEMA or transportation or something, and you might want to combine your environmental review process with theirs.
Okay.
But you wouldn't want to do that for tax credits, so just to always say no.
So if you hit yes, does something pop up that says you might want to think about combining reviews?
If you say yes, you will get a screen that asks you to consider doing a cooperating agency agreement with the other agency, and you don't want to do that. That's not going to be something you'll want to do, so just say no. And here are some reminders on that screen and for generally starting a new review. That initial screen has a lot of information on it, and it's easy to miss a question. So once you're at the bottom of the screen and you press save, you might notice that the screen just freezes and nothing happens. That's probably because all the way at the top of the screen, there's a little error message saying that you forgot something. In a perfect world, that error message would be at the bottom of the screen. We're working on it. But so if you're at the bottom, you're trying to press save and continue and nothing's happening, try to remember to scroll to the top and see if you've got a red error message at the top of that screen. Something that you'll see a lot. Okay, sorry, looking into questions. This box doesn't help us regarding adopting a Part 50 for Part 50 purposes. Is there some place on the HEROS site that does assist with the adoption of the Part 50?
I think they're asking if they want to use a Part 58 that was previously completed for their Part 50.
Yeah. So there's nothing in HEROS at this point for that. You know, we definitely encourage people to use information that they got from a previously completed review, whether that's Part 58 or Part 50. But there isn't a means of just pulling that in directly into your review. You'll have to start a new review.
Right, so you get a hold of the documentation from that Part 58 or Part 50 or whatever it is that was a previous review that you're trying to use information from, and you put it into this review.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way it works no matter what, whether you're using HEROS or not.
Right. And that is a really good question, one we get a lot. We're working on a long-term plan on making that a little easier. So again, program name would be the other housing program. This grant number line is actually already updated. It's now PIC number. And remember to use the save button often, or you might lose your information.
But it's always, and moving forward, it's always going to say grant number on that screen, right? So I think that's another thing we'll just clarify within the user guide, that this is a confusing term, but for RAD purposes it means this.
Yeah, and maybe we'll clarify that for everybody, because actually everyone finds that confusing. Okay, sorry, the question was actually about whether using the dollar amount of the annual HAP was right. I don't.
What was the previous question?
Let's go back to the previous screen. So for everyone, we have a question about.
Martha, she's trying to ask a question.
Oh,
I see.
Oh, I see.
Oh, so maybe for the amount of money question that's on that first screen, what should RAD put into?
Can we go back to that?
She's asking about the. She's asking about.
Let's go back to that screen with a question.
Federal funds money.
Estimated total HUD funded amount. So here you've got the funding amount under the line that starts with grant project number, and then you also have this estimated total HUD funded amount too.
The sources of funds, right? So
the
RAD money is going to be cap funds, op funds, right?
Right. So are we looking, Liz and Hillary? Are we looking to put in there the amount of HUD money in the development budget, or the ongoing operating subsidy that is provided? I presume, since you mostly deal with the development side, it's how much HUD money is being contributed to the construction, I presume, is really what you're asking for here.
That's, yeah, and I'll get into what we're going for with that. From an environmental side, we don't generally care about precise amounts of money, but it helps us a lot to give an idea of the scope of a project more than anything. A multi-million-dollar project is generally going to have a bigger environmental impact than a project that doesn't get a lot of money. So we're mostly looking for an idea of scope here, so something that kind of reflects what's going into this specific project, and the construction amount.
Right, so the construction cost would be the use of the money, the source of the money would be cap fund, op fund, home in this particular case. I think that's what you're looking for, but not the ongoing operating subsidy through the HAP contract. That's not what you're looking for.
Right.
Correct.
That sounds right.
That sounds right.
This is straight from the sources and uses that's being reviewed in the financing plan. It gets to how much work is getting done and how is that work getting paid for.
So therefore, on this page, the estimated total project cost form that says $400,000, that's like the equivalent of the total development budget for the project. And of which
how much is HUD paying?
HUD paying $200,000 and theoretically.
Tax credits are another $200,000.
Yeah,
Whatever,
right.
I mean, whatever's the difference.
Okay.
Or a mortgage.
Hopefully, Martha, that answers the question.
Thank you. All right. Okay. So once you get through your initial screen, we'll get into summarizing the project, which is where we'd get into the project description, which you may recall from our kickoff training. We want a full, complete, plain language description of everything that's going on in this project. So I want to be able to read it and understand what's going to happen in this project. If there's new construction, how many units are being constructed. If there's demolition, if there's rehab, I want to be able to tell whether it's interior or exterior rehab. I want to be able to know what's going on here.
So if it's a self-funded project, for example, we often say PHA is converting self-funded. It could be no debt, could be not doing any repairs. It's just an elderly building that they're converting the assistants over. You'd want them to describe that there. It's a 100-unit building that we're converting, and there's no immediate repairs being done to the property, no alteration of the property.
Right, yeah. And remember, this is a public document, and it will be posted where the public can read it, so people who don't understand our acronyms or our
So that's
terms.
fascinating. This, when you use HEROS, it immediately becomes public.
Not immediately, when it's done.
When it's completed, it will be public. That's good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a unique thing for housing, because for housing we don't do public notices in general unless there's a floodplain process that requires it. So it's something everybody's going to get used to a little bit.
And so indeed, this is being used now by housing for FHA production. Are they starting to use this now?
No, they have not started.
But when they will, same thing.
Yep.
They'll do these, and these will then become available to the public once they finalize the review.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
In the case of RAD, it's kind of just letting them know there's not really anything they can do, because it goes online after the environmental review is already done. So you don't really have to worry about the public that much, as opposed to Part 58 reviews that have to respond to the public's comments. But we're just keeping everyone apprised.
Okay.
So going back to that last slide. So in the project description, if you do find that you're getting really involved and detailed and it doesn't all fit in there, we'd encourage you to attach another document or any other supplemental documents that explain the project, or maps, photographs, anything that gives a fuller picture. So this is the first screen where you'll see that upload option, which will appear a lot. So that's where the first one of those is. For location, we'll ask you to put in an address. There's also this box for additional location information. And it's kind of a balance. Here in this example, I put HUD headquarters building. That's really enough information. People know where that is. If you were a project where you're building an entirely new development, an address might not be helpful. So you might want to give a paragraph form description of the location. So, you know, you're not going to need to put in a paragraph in every case. It's kind of use your judgment on what makes sense for your individual project situation. So next slide, get into a little more using HEROS navigation information. You'll notice on the left side of every screen we have this side menu. So once you start a review, You don't have to click through, say, then continue on every screen. You can jump around using the side menu. And that will expand as you go through your review to reflect which screens required for your particular review based on the level of review and some other components. Then I already pointed out the information boxes, but remember to click on those. If you don't understand a question, look to see if there's a little blue box or a little blue button thing. Recommend not using your internet browser's back buttons because those you might not save your information, and sometimes they cause things to malfunction a little bit. And my last sad navigation note that I know everyone hates is that you will get logged out after 20 minutes if you're inactive, which can especially be an issue on environmental reviews because you might be tracking down a map or trying to figure out how to answer a question, and then you get logged out. So make sure that you check in. You do get a 3-minute warning after 17 minutes. So check here and there, especially if you're doing a screen with a lot of work on it. Yeah, this is because we are built on the same platform as financial systems. So we have a little more security than one would really require for a system where everything gets posted on a publicly facing website. We don't really have a lot of secrets in HEROS, generally speaking, but well. So here's our level of review screen. Here's one where the e-tutorial video is really not helpful because it's very different from Part 50 to Part 58. So on Part 50, especially for RAD, it's fairly easy choosing your level of review. You can refer back to our kickoff training. There's only 2 levels of review that will apply to you. It's always pretty much going to be either categorically excluded subject to 50.4 or an environmental assessment level of review. So hopefully you'll remember how to do that from the kickoff, but generally speaking, anything minor rehab or no rehab is going to be categorically excluded subject to. Anything involving major rehab, new construction, demolition is going to require an environmental assessment. So,
and that's described in the RAD environmental review guidance document also,
yes.
Which ones apply to RAD, which categorical exclusions. And that's just another thing that we'll have in the user guide as a note.
So this is kind of Part A. Once you know your level of review, it's the equivalent of Part A in the 4128, where you'll fill in all of your related laws and authorities. So this is what that looks like when it's all filled out. If you click again, we'll see.
We'll come back a second, Robert. So not only are you saying yes or no, but you're giving providing some notes over to the right column of why.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, and you need to explain your reasoning and how you determined that you're in compliance with each of these. So this starts out blank, and then, here, I'll take over the mouse. To complete each of these, you'll need to click on each individual blue link to be taken to a specific screen for that related law. So we have a unique screen for each one of these 16 laws and authorities listed in 50.4. These are pretty rigorous. They really walk you through this most of the time, which is helpful since a lot of these are a little obscure. Might not be familiar with airport hazards regulations or know that those existed, but they do. So right at the top of the screen, we have an overview of what those requirements are. Then the legislation and regulations that you can refer to for more information, and a link to our OEE's website with a lot more detail on that. This still says 1CPD, which is the old name. It's currently the HUD Exchange, but these links still work. They redirect to the new. So anytime you see 1CPD, think HUD Exchange. We just expanded to the rest of the department. So for each of these laws, you'll answer a series of yes or no and multiple choice questions to help you determine if you're in compliance. And then after each answer, you'll have to press next because your response to each question feeds into what happens next. So choose your own adventure situation. When you're done with the screen or at any time in the middle of the screen, you can save and return to that kind of Part A summary screen.
So the next doesn't save?
I believe it does, but it takes you to the next step.
Right. But
yeah.
Save everything. So if I'm going through this and I'm having to look stuff up and I'm hitting next and I'm going to look stuff up.
Oh, that's a good question.
Am I getting logged out? Saved?
I don't know. I would be safe and press save.
Yeah.
I think next might save, but I'm not 100% on that one. Good question. And then you'll also see this cancel review button in the bottom right. You can ignore that 99% of the time. We have that because there are some cases where, based on your responses to these questions, HEROS will just tell you this project cannot proceed at this location. If you were trying to do a project in a coastal barrier resource unit, for example, there's just a floodway. Yeah, there are certain locations where HUD will not fund projects. So if that happens, it'll just tell you to press that cancel button. This project is off. That can happen.
You don't even have to think about it.
Yeah. You can just do it right from this screen. So this shows kind of the steps of going through one of these related laws screens. So here, first step was just to figure out if you were within range of an airport, and the second step helps you figure out if you're actually in a runway protection clear zone or accident potential zone. And you can, again, go back to this HUD Exchange, one CBD site for more information on how to get those maps, how to figure that out. And then once you get to the end of this analysis, so here my project wasn't in an accident potential or runway projection zone. I think that's supposed to be protection. I think that's a typo. We do have a ticket in for fixing that. So my project's in compliance with airport hazards requirements, but I did get this red text at the bottom of the screen telling me to upload a map demonstrating that I'm a safe distance from the nearest airport. So follow those instructions. Then you'll be taken to the screen summary where that compliance determination we saw on the overall Part A screen is filled in automatically for you. You'll get one that just pops up with a compliance determination based on your statements above. However, that is editable. In this case, you wouldn't necessarily need to add anything, but there are other places where you might want to fill in a lot more details, discuss what your analysis was, anybody you talked to, any specific page numbers or websites people might want to refer to for more information.
Right, so for something like this where we don't have our applicants, they're not able to access HEROS yet, so they're not uploading documents and stuff for us. What we're probably going to get is a big, giant document with everything attached. This might be a good place to say you can find the map on page such and such of the environmental report.
Right, good point. Yeah, PHAs are likely to give you a document as opposed to separate documents.
Yeah, and I have a slide highlighting, but don't feel obligated to upload these individually. The HEROS will let you continue even if you don't upload something in every upload box. So feel free to upload one hideous document. Just make sure that anywhere relevant you be as clear as possible about where people can find the document they need. So don't just say, see that 200-page monster upload for my airport map. Say it's on page 89 or appendix whatever. But if you have the documents individually, go ahead and upload them on each screen. That's ideal. We just don't want to torture you by making you break down a document into its components.
We don't want to torture you.
Yeah, the goal is to avoid torture. That's I know it doesn't seem that way. So here's an example of kind of a good compliance determination. Contamination is one where we see a lot of detail, and it's a place where you're going to want to really fill in what exactly happened, because just saying you did a phase 1 and a phase 2 raises a lot of questions, and people might want to know what was in that phase 1 and the phase 2. So a little summary of what went on there would be ideal, so people don't have to hunt through it. And I think I can hand this back to you because I don't have any more crazy slides coming up, I think. And here's a reminder to, like we were just talking about, since you will be asked to upload a lot of documents when you use HEROS, don't feel obligated to upload the same document over and over again or make it any harder than it has to be. So in this example, it was kind of a toned down one where if I was doing a project in an interior county of a coastal state, I'm going to be asked repeatedly, is there a coastline by this project? And I might not necessarily want to upload a map every time showing that, like, Charlottesville, Virginia is not on the coast. It's clearly very far from the coast. You can upload that map once and then just reference it in the next place. Oh, wait, I do have things on this. So here on the Coastal Barrier Resources Act screen, I uploaded a map showing that my project was not in a coastal county. And on the Coastal Zone Management screen, when I'm asked a very similar question, prompted to upload a very similar map, I just referenced kind of very clearly where somebody reviewing my project could find that map showing that my city or county is not anywhere near a coastline. So this is our housing-specific screen as it is now. It's not where it will be hopefully in the future, but this just covers some factors that we don't normally ask in CBD to be included in an environmental review record, but are required by the MAP guide as part of the environmental review. So this asks for information on lead-based paint, radon, and asbestos, and it would be a good place to fill in those details. Sorry, it doesn't walk you through that, but that's kind of a long-term goal.
This would also be, you'll notice, when you get more familiar with maps, that there are requirements on oil and gas wells, pipelines, and towers, and that would also be put into this screen.
Huh.
We'll
have even more
direction in the
the user guide.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll fill in some of those details. Apologies for that. And so here, if you're doing an environmental assessment, you'll get a few extra screens specifically for that. That's kind of part B section of the 4128. So you'll just go through those, and those are hopefully fairly self-explanatory.
Yeah, and this is where HEROS gets much more helpful than the 4128, which is really direct of information on environmental assessment level of review. This gives you a lot more information on that.
Yeah, especially that page, the HUD Exchange one CBD site linked to the top of this gives a lot of detail on what you're supposed to be putting in these. Once you're finished with all of that analysis, the related laws and your EA factors, any mitigation measures or conditions that were put on the project are going to be summarized here for convenience, so you see them all in one place. So in this project, my project was in compliance with every related law and everything except for floodplain management, and I'm going to have to do some mitigation because my project is in a 100-year floodplain. This sentence would be finished in a real review, obviously. And then this chart of all of your required mitigation measures are going to be kind of highlighted in the environmental review record because they're really important.
So that'll be helpful for you all for purposes of the RAD conversion commitment or the approval letter when you're putting in conditions on those approvals that have to do with environmental review. It'll be nicely summarized here.
And then once you pass that, you're going to have to make your final determination about whether the project, any extraordinary circumstances apply, or whether there were any significant impacts And there's a different screen, of course, whether you're an environmental assessment or categorically excluded project. So you'll answer one or the other of these questions. Then finally, you'll go to the certifications page, which takes all the same signatures as you'd see on the 4128, but puts them into this screen. So first, of course, you would sign off on it. It's really important that you press this certify button or your certification will not save. So please press certify. Then you'll get a little pop-up that says you've completed this certification. And so make sure to sign off on it. You don't have to sign off on paper. You can just do it through here. Then as you go through this screen, you'll see this. Your supervisor would sign off exactly the same way. If it's over 200 units, you'll need the environmental clearance officer to sign off as well. They'll sign, and then finally it will go to the approving official for their signature or certification. I think technically we're not supposed to call it an electronic signature. It is a certification. There is a system security difference between those aspects. When you're done with your certification, you can route it to the next person at the bottom of the screen where you see you can enter an email address and send notifications that they will get a system-generated email saying this review is ready for your certification, sign in here. That's the easiest way to let people know they have a review to sign off on in HEROS. And once all the certifications are complete, you'll press this, hopefully, certifications complete, project approved button at the bottom of the screen, and that will mark the review complete so that it's no longer in progress on the dashboard.
So this line, accurate view will be sent carbon copy? Will you carbon copy do you?
It's an email. Yeah. It's like the picture of the floppy disk to save things.
I have a question about the last slide. When we hit certification complete, project approved, is that automatically posted to the website?
You will actually get one more screen that just says press archive to post this on the archives.
The reason I ask is because it's conceivable that someone would complete environmental review and it would be acceptable for environmental reasons, but then maybe the project's rejected for other reasons. I guess in that situation, technically it would be approved for this purpose, but you know, I'm not sure how we would handle it.
Yeah, I don't know how we would. That might be a case-by-case situation.
Is there somewhere where we can note something like that? Let's say they go through, they do the review, and then they end up getting project rejected, but they can put in like the reasons why?
Yes, there is. So let's remember to go back to that when we get to the live demo.
Okay.
Yeah, you can cancel the review, and when you cancel your review, you're asked whether it was an environmental reason it was canceled, like if it was in a floodway or something, or if it was a non-environmental reason, like you just ran out of funding or there was a program problem or something. So we do distinguish between those. So as I said, probably a lot of times, we're in an extended pilot phase right now while we work to make improvements and make sure that the system's working. So we really, really encourage you to give your feedback either through the HUD exchange or just emailing or calling me directly to talk about what's working or what's not working. You're probably not going to call me to say it's working. I mean, that would be great. I'd appreciate that. And whether that's, you know, that can be anything. If it's a question that doesn't make sense to you, something where you just don't think that the process works with the RAD process, or you're not sure how it works. If you log into HEROS and you get a 404 message saying HEROS server is down, let me know, because I might not know about that. So anything at all that isn't working or you're confused about, please let me know so we can make sure that we're making that work. And like I said, it's our top priority to get your PHAs, your consultants, everybody in. This is Hillary's mascot, I think.
This has been, in my mind, unofficial RAD mascot for the last several months.
He comes up
now
when
you guys know.
When you Google image RAD, this guy
pops up.
So some child is named Rad.
Or he just is.
Of being rad.
He is rad. Yeah. All right. I guess it's a good time for questions if anybody has any, and then we'll.
Yes, I love the mullet too. Thank you for that.
Everyone loves mullet. Yeah. We have a whole store of these.
So okay, so I'm not freaked out.
Good.
Okay.
Looks pretty reasonable, right? And I thought it was going to be overwhelmingly technical, detailed, and it does walk you through where you need to go, but you don't get lost out. It seems very
I hope
easy.
so.
Yeah.
It's possible to get lost. I don't want to oversell it.
Yeah.
It has happened. But so we got a question about if we have plans to roll this out to PIH field offices, and no. I mean, we intend to.
Yeah.
It's a long-term plan, but we have no short-term plans.
And when it's rolled out to PIH offices, it's for PIH because they're part of a Part 58 review process, not for Part 50.
Eventually, we'll get to both.
Yeah.
They could have Part 50.
They could have Part 50.
They have both. But we have a lot to work out before we get to PIH. Yeah. So if you don't mind me hopping on computer, go into some. I guess I can just. So I'm going into the training environment. As I mentioned, we don't make real reviews and can just practice. But just like in the real environment, you'd log in with your H number and your regular LAN password that you use to log in to your computer in the morning. It's working. So my first step, once I get in here, is I'm going to fix my compatibility settings. Or maybe it's not. Maybe I don't fix them right away so you can see what happens. And you'll get some familiarity with what that looks like. So yeah, Hillary and I just had a few screens that we were planning to highlight here.
And
then
we want to make sure you know how to start the review and end the review. And then if we have time, what we're going to do is go through something that's, like the toxic screen, just so you have an idea of how step by step it'll take you through that.
I think we're doing pretty well on time. And if you have any questions, yeah. I think we'll be really able to pop right in and show how something looks. Hopefully. I'm thinking today. So here's what I have. For start a new review and give it a time to think. So your first hint that I have not fixed my compatibility settings is that these buttons are not lined up. That's already a hint.
You hit Part 50?
Yes.
Important.
Yeah, you actually can't click Part 58. You can only pick Part 50.
Oh, there you go.
But we do make you choose. Only certain people, consultants and contractors, since they could do either Part 50 or Part 58, they can pick. Public housing authorities can do either one. But you all would not be able to. All right. Oh, wait, did you just let me do that? That's interesting.
There's no RAD program, it's just other housing programs.
Right.
Right.
And that's one of the system updates that are on the docket. But for now, we just pick other housing.
Probably have a million reviews called that.
There you go.
And sure. And that I'll add in my comments for me. So you just need to fill in that row if you would like to, if you're also doing a review for another funding source. For example, if this project is also getting home funds and you've assumed Part 50 responsibilities for those home funds as well, you can add another funding source to get into that, and you would list that here too.
So is add another funding source just to keep track of all funding sources, not the ones you're doing a review for? Right?
It's to keep the track of the ones you're doing a review for.
Okay.
So if I'm not doing a review for a first mortgage, for example, I wouldn't add that here. Because you're not looking for the complete sources of funds, only the HUD funds.
Only the funds that you're doing the review for HUD. Yeah, so even if this project was also receiving home funds, but they were doing a separate Part 58 review for those home funds, you wouldn't have to list that there. We just want to know what funds, what programs this review covers. So delete that. So keep typing things in here. I do need to fill in all of these. Again, as we established, say no to this one. Just say today's date, which will be a frequent answer. You do need to fill in the grant recipient information, which I'm tired of typing, so it gets gibberish. And then your name, presumably, is going to go under the HUD preparer information. Now, nothing happens when I press save and continue. That's because I did not say how many units. So you need to make sure that you fill in the answer to that question before you can continue. I'm just going to keep recapping problems from earlier. So now it is letting me continue on, I think. It's thinking about it. Here's a question or a screen I didn't mention earlier. It's not a big deal. We just do want to make sure that you consider whether there's anything sensitive in your project that shouldn't go up on our website. I don't think that's super likely for your program, but if it was something where you were building a domestic violence shelter that we might not want to put on our website where that is. So if that was the case, you would get a reminder not to post the address of your domestic violence shelter on our website, and some tips about how to do that. But I don't think it's going to be an issue for you all.
What about sites where, this would be really unique too, but there's a tribal interest that the tribes cannot describe publicly?
That actually would go on the historic preservation screen, presuming that's where it came up.
Right.
If during the course of your Section 106 consultation for the National Historic Preservation Act, you realized that this was a sacred site for a tribe, and you can't tell where it is, or you can't tell the situation, you'll be prompted separately there to not disclose that information. Keep going through here. You will be asked to validate the address because another one of our long-term things that we're kind of working on is a cross-system with CPD maps where our environmental reviews will be mapped out so that the public, if they want to look at sites or objects in their area, they don't need to sort it on the HUD Exchange. They can look at a map of CPD maps and see where things are. That should work pretty well, the validate address option. I didn't really show you how the upload function works, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You know, press browse, find your document. I'm not going to snoop around in Robert's document, but once you selected, you press upload, and then it would automatically close out that window and show up right here. These questions you don't really have to worry about. They're kind of survey questions for our data collection purposes, so we know what's going on out there. So presumably yours are going to be residential, not non-residential. But you would select the appropriate activities and property types. And then we will go into the level of review screen next, which we did look at before. This is interesting. I did not fix your compatibility settings, but everything seems to be working. So, yeah, that is not usually the case. Don't rely on that. So I'm saying that this is a multifamily rehab project. These are all the buttons I would select for that. If it was a categorically excluded multifamily rehab project, you know, make sure that all of these things apply.
So it's not sub-rehab. That's what we're going for on this one.
Yes, I'm making this minor rehab. Gives us fewer screens. If it's an EA, you would just click here. You don't need to choose a citation, as there wouldn't be any corresponding citation.
And the EA would be if it is sub-rehab or if it's new.
Don't worry about this extraordinary circumstances option. It's extraordinary. I don't see it really coming up in the RAD program. If you ever think that your project might have extraordinary circumstances, let somebody know. Will help, but I wouldn't be concerned about it. So again, here once you've chosen your level of review, you'll go here where you'll see all of these related laws and authorities, including the housing requirements screen. Do you want to jump into contamination or?
Do it.
All right.
So we're going to just go through the contamination screen, and going to discuss it based on the case study that we talked about last time we had a training, which was incidentally for the contamination issue. And as you may recall, there wasn't anything really complicated with it, so it'll give us a quick run through on that screen.
So again, like our airports example, we don't have any legislation that goes with this one, but see a little summary in our regulations, and the HUD exchange site should work. So Hillary, remind me of what happened in that case study.
Yeah, so for this case study, we actually had a Phase 1 ESA. So for that, we would check that box to show that's how it has been documented. But as you guys know, for RAD, you may instead have a transaction screen. And if that is the case, then you would have to click none of the above. And we just go from there. But for our purposes here, we'll click Phase 1 ESA.
Keep confusing the system. Oh. I don't think it'll let me check both none of the above and
Phase 1. When you clicked none of the above, it unchecked the top one, but then when you checked the top one, it didn't uncheck it, none of the above. And now none of them are fascinating.
You never know.
You never know.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Yeah.
It's fascinating for now.
Yeah, I never get tired of finding bugs. Oh, okay. Okay.
The initial screen, would the amount of money on the program line be equal to the HUD funds beneath? In other words, should the two equal? Not. So I think the question is, will the amount you have in the program line always be the same as the total amount? I don't think that's necessarily true. It depends how many different programs you're doing the review for. So it's going to list the different HUD programs that you're composing this review for. If you have more than one, it will be a different amount in the total. If it's just one, then it will be the same amount.
But it would not be the same if the HUD funds were only paying a part of
that's
the
true.
total.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the HUD funds
right?
total.
So
Yeah.
say I'm doing $10 million of rehab, and I'm paying for it with $2 million of cap funds and an $8 million tax credit transaction.
Yeah, that's true.
That
So you could actually have several different amounts, right? You're going to have each amount listed for each program that the review is for, and then you're going to have a HUD funds total, which equals the total of those. And then there's an additional total for the total project cost.
But those two numbers don't have to match.
Right. And they could all be the same or they could all be different.
All right, taught you guys well. It's all very clear.
Robert and I nailed it. So if that didn't make sense, please ask another question.
I remember seeing you do that earlier, and now I cannot find it. Oh, because I couldn't even see it. All right. If you have both single-family and multifamily in the project, would that require an individual environmental for each property? No. You'd aggregate everything. Consider everything that's logically and geographically part of the same project or same environmental issue. That would all go into the same environmental review. So, for example, on that project description screen, summary screen, when I said that I was doing rehab of multifamily, I would just check both single family and multifamily. I could also select non-residential, just add as many things. Those are
just put in the different addresses
checkboxes
in that one screen. I mean, practically what you may end up having to do is talk about if there are different addresses or something, where we've got like a scattered site, you may end up having to do separate reviews for that, though, right?
Yeah, if they're not on the same site, it starts to get a little trickier about
That's what Harry's asking here.
Okay.
So Harry's saying, if we've got a large number of sites, what are we supposed to do in that? So it sounds like the question you just answered, if there's single-family and multifamily on the same site, you could aggregate things. But what Harry's asking now is if I've got single-family sites all over the city, what do we do there?
What I would recommend, at least, the way that we would handle it with 4128 is we kind of have one like Excel spreadsheet basically that would reference the different reviews that are done for each address, each site. Because we'd have different documentation for each address or each site submitted. In HEROS, what might make sense is to list the different addresses in that box that asks you about the location, and then maybe have separate reviews for that. Does that make sense? Is there a better way to link reviews in HEROS?
Generally, I would tell people to tier for that, but I'm not confident that it makes sense to tier here.
I don't think
we do in OEE.
Oh.
But it's a little harder. It is really tricky to figure out which makes more sense. And there's really compelling arguments on both sides. So it's kind of not a HEROS question. It's kind of an environmental review question. I mean,
yeah. If it comes up, we better have a separate conversation.
Yeah.
So let us know.
Yeah, we need to have a bigger conversation about that. Yeah, keep letting me know when we have questions. All right, so we're going to finish this, returning to the contamination issue.
Yeah. So for the purposes of the case study that we had last week, if you'll remember, there were no recognized environmental conditions identified in that Phase 1 ESA. However, there were a few things that we thought may be business environmental risks. There was a PCB transformer on the site that we wanted to follow up on. There was also some discarded refrigerators and ranges on the site that we would want to have cleaned up. So that's something that we could put in here as far as business environmental risks go. The other thing you might want to note here is there might be some follow-up on a potential wreck because we might disagree with this conclusion. So for this Phase 1 ESA, they said no wrecks, but they had brought up that the site was formerly used for agriculture. And we had kind of talked a little bit about usually if it's the former agricultural site, we'll look for an explanation of why that doesn't trigger a REC, trigger a recognized environmental condition, and they really didn't have that discussion in the document. So this might be a situation where here you kind of note what's going on and follow up later when the phase 1 is updated to address that concern. At least that's what I would recommend based on where we were at in our case study last week.
Now this is kind of an unusual screen because we ask people to discuss here, but then you'll also, I believe, be taken straight to the compliance determination where you probably want to discuss kind of the same details. So, thinking, there we go. So make sure that you're kind of summarizing the information that somebody would want to have in both, in the compliance determination, because this is a really important one to be very thorough because it's so complicated. And people are going to have a lot of questions. It's a really crucial one. Now I've finally been taking my compliance determination, which came out pretty simple. Just said, you know, there weren't any RECs cited at phase 1, but I can.
But here would be where, so let's say the way this pans out for this phase 1 ESA is they explain the agricultural use. It's not a big deal, and we're comfortable that there's no RECs, but we still want to make sure that the PCB transformer is addressed and that. What was the other thing? Oh, they get rid of all the kind of like trash that was on the site, the ranges and the refrigerators. We could put that in here. So we'd say no phase 2 ESA is required because there are no RECs, and we don't think there's a reason to test the site for contamination. But we're going to put condition in the review or in the agreement that they clean up the ranges and they figure out what's going on with the transformer.
So you can add on as much as you want here. You can also delete this if you'd like. You know, edit it however you want it. It's just to serve as a guide so that you don't have to start from scratch every time, especially on the easier ones. So this is kind of a gray area.
Yeah, and supporting documentation would be if you had a phase 1 ESA that only addressed site contamination. Let's say they gave it to us nice and separately. That's what we put for this screen.
And if not, you would want to put something in here that says, you know, see pages, whatever to whatever of the document that I uploaded on whatever screen. And then I save and return to summary, and once we get there, you'll see this beautiful project or compliance determination that we ended up with will appear on that screen summary. One of these days. It is thinking. Get very hot. I'm going to blame your computer.
Good. Yeah. They all know HEROS pretty well now. So
yeah.
First thing they can do is they're running into some issues is call the environmental officer in the field if they get stuck somewhere. Right? It's a resource.
I would say if they're having like a systems problem, Liz, it's best to contact Liz. If it's a question like, this tells me I need to get this map, but I don't understand what that means, then it would be good to contact them. Now, we did have a question about what is a REC. I guess you missed our training 2 weeks ago. I won't call out who that was, but REC is a recognized environmental condition, and it basically means it's an indication of whether there could be hazardous waste, petroleum, or petroleum products on the site. So when we get a phase 1 ESA, that's what the environmental professional is looking for in that review.
I'm going to see if I can. Oh, I think we've frozen altogether at this point. Yeah. That's fun. Let's reload, see if that works. No, we lost it. All right, close that window. Is this window still, okay, this one's still good. Let's see if I can show us a handy other way to get there. If you want to find more about HEROS, you could go to our website at the HUD Exchange. HEROS is under featured topics. And then from this page, you'll get a lot of training resources, our frequently asked questions, the current environmental review records. This practice using HEROS link is what would take you to the training environment. That works. I say I've gotten permission to blame Robert's computer for this, so don't attribute this to HEROS.
Not HEROS. Not HEROS.
That's optimistic.
Here we go. Just see if in our last 6 minutes we can take a look at that. It did leave me logged in. That's great. I don't have to take the risk of showing everyone my password again. Although, wait, okay, here we go. So I'm going to go to my example project in this scroll all the way to the bottom of the screen to the edit selected environmental review. That will be all the way at the bottom. Somebody in Brownsville, Texas has been very active in the training environment. You can see the other ones are all demos, so they'll probably be. So yeah, here we have what we came up with earlier. I'm going to use the side menu to jump straight to the certification screen to show you what that looks like. This is the only screen that we have a Part 50 specific e-tutorial on. So all of our other e-tutorials were made by contractors who can only make content for non-HUD audiences. And we made this one in-house, so it's not as fancy as the other e-tutorials, but it is targeted to HUD.
It's better.
Yes, it's really sophisticated. It's me talking, so you get more of this. So when you're ready to sign off on your review, you press this I certify button. I recommend this project for approval, and you see my name and the date have already filled in here because it knows who I am. So once I pressed the I certify button, my name showed up. And I would put in my title here.
What would someone normally put in the comments?
We put in that because it was on the 4128. So I don't know.
Okay. I was going to suggest, I mean, I know it's part of the project summary that we'll have any mitigation measures kind of laid out, but this might be another place if you were trying to, being extra paranoid and extra thorough and wanted to make sure people were paying attention to the mitigation measures that are being proposed, you could put that here too.
Yeah, it might be a good place to send a message to your supervisor, the approving official, about what you think.
Yeah, that's good.
If there's any issues.
Yeah, here are a few things to pay attention to before you sign this.
Yeah, I would definitely put comments in if I recommend that this project be rejected. And again, make sure you press this certify button. When you press that, you'll get a pop-up making sure that that works out. And then go to the bottom of the screen to put in the next person. In this case, it would be your supervisor's email address, and also put in your email address. Press the notifications, and then you should get an email in like 2 minutes about that. And if you don't get an email, let me know again.
So if I'm a reviewing official or whatever, I just look for an email from Harry or Kat or whatever that sends it up to me, not a separate site I go to that lists my things. I get this email.
Yeah, you'll get an email. It is one of our upgrades. We're planning to retool the dashboard so that you'll only see the reviews that someone wants you to look at or that you're working on. So you won't have to sort through. If somebody wants you to sign something, it would be like the only one showing up, but not right now.
Let's say I'm the final person to sign it, I'm the reviewing or unofficial or whatever. I do that, then is there anything that tells the TM or the branch chief that I'm signed off on it, or is there an email that goes back to them?
You would again use the same email notification. Yeah, so you can use this over and over again. Just keep sending it back and forth to whoever's the next person. So when you were done, Greg, you would send it back to probably the preparer to finish up.
Yeah.
And then really all they have to do from here is press certifications complete, project approved.
Get rejected. Let's see what happens.
don't want to confuse it. It's already so confused. I think if you press rejected, you would just go back to the project summary, or your dashboard. So here you press archive, and then it will go online and finish, and it'll be marked completed, and you get a little semi-happy pop-up. It doesn't say, note, that your review is completed. It just says that you have indicated that your review is completed. In this case, I, in fact, did not complete this review. I skipped a lot of steps. So, you know, HEROS is not responsible if you just only do the contamination screen and call it a day. That's your responsibility. And I forgot to show you the part about completing, or about canceling reviews. I'm hoping to get back there and show that really quickly. But we are at 4 o'clock now. And do we have any questions, or can I tell them?
There are no questions.
There are no questions. Good. So you can see that review is now marked completed. Even though I did not finish it, it is your responsibility to make sure that you actually fill in everything in. Generating the Word, with the Word document, the output, you will get a screen that prompts you to do that, and looking over that screen to preview is really the right point to make sure that you filled everything in. If there's any blanks on that, then that would be your clue to go back and fill in anything that's missing. So here, if I wanted to cancel my review, I would click on this red X, and then I would say whether it was environmental or program reasons.
We also look at the summary screen to see what happened when we put in that stuff about the failing.
Sure.
Just real quick. If we can get there.
If we don't get stuck here for hours. Oh, no. Okay. Stop clicking. Ooh.
Oh, never mind.
Here, that won't work because that's the only one I edited. I can reopen it. That might slow us down further.
Does anyone have any questions in the meantime?
Hoping that means we were very clear. Getting a really old-timey hourglass on this. It's considering. Webinar's going out with a whimper.
Oh, no.
All right. While we're waiting, to mention there are going to be more trainings in this series, which are not currently scheduled, but we will work that out.
Yes. I'm actually hoping we can do floodplain management review next, team. I know there's been a lot of questions on that, and we'll follow up to schedule something and make sure that's actually the one that can happen next.
Yeah, great.
But just an FYI.
All right, if you're in the middle of completing a review, will it hold the information already done to come back later? Yes. And we kind of just saw that just now, but it will keep this as long as you press the save and continue and save and go back buttons. You know, you've got to save your work so we don't lose it. But sure, environmental reviews frequently can take a long time to complete. So you know, it's often important to come back and save them halfway done. And here you can see my compliance determination from a few minutes ago. Still there. It'll still be there in months. This will never go away. All right. Anything anybody wants to go through here? Any questions? Talk to you hopefully in a couple weeks for our next session.
Thanks, Hillary.
Thanks, everybody.